you know, this means war.
We will fight until Hitler and his Nazi gangsters suffer disastrous, overwhelming, and complete defeat.
Oh, I just can't wait to take my act back on the road again, and here I am. Hello, everybody. Right back in at you, it's your DJ Crazy Tom, ready to roll with another edition of the Crazy Tom Show. This time it is for this Thursday, April the 4th. And here in South Jersey, spring still has not arrived. As a matter of fact, we might be lucky to hit 54, 55 degrees today, but it just seems like winter will not go away. I guess Father Time really upset Mother Nature. I really don't know what's happened, but in any case, this week's Crazy Tom Show will have a little bit of sports involved, and of course another couple of issues that I just have to bring to the table, and even one that is just completely of the bizarre files, if you know what I mean. Of course, I'll be talking about the first week of Major League Baseball, and then, of course, I'll deal with, of course, the men's Final Four for college basketball. I'll also be dealing about a couple other college basketball issues, one of which will be in my What Drives Me Crazy segment. I'll also mention about, yes, more gun control news, if you wouldn't believe, and I'll also mention about you're a threat if, well, I'll tell you what the reasons are. And like I said, I'll have another bizarre story to share with you, so do stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, this Crazy Tom Show, I'd like to remind everybody, is brought to you by your friends at the Crankiness Crusher. Now tell me something, I need one of them. I have had an absolutely awful week when it has been with dealing with people. I don't know why that's the case. I'm still trying to figure everything out, but it just seems like humanity has just been very unkind to me this week, and that's why I've been a bit on the downside. So this is what I do. I go to crankinesscrusher.com and do anything possible to ensure I see something positive out there that I can take for my day and then kind of use as a rallying cry. And more often than not, they work. You should know what I'm talking about. Of course, my longtime friend Tara Rummel-Burson out in near the Jersey Shore, she happened to set up that website about a year or so ago, and it has been an absolutely wonderful thing. So what you need to do is go to the website at crankinesscrusher.com or visit her Facebook page, facebook.com/crankinesscrusher. Trust me, they work. It's all state of mind. Get out of your doldrums and, hey, think something positive. It makes a world of difference. Again, it's a Crankiness Crusher. Just visit crankinesscrusher.com or facebook.com/crankinesscrusher. This show is also brought to you by your friends at Michelle's Crochet, by Epic Playground out in Boulder, Colorado, also by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, and of course, by Liberated Syndication, which has housed my Crazy Tom Show since, of course, 2006. Now, getting with the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, of course, I did this way back in 2003, and of course, graduated from the Cherry Hill, New Jersey campus, and they really have made my life very interesting in the way that I go about things now. That school's been around since 1964, and they have placed people in the fields of radio, television, and a lot of other production stuff. Trust me, the Connecticut School of Broadcasting is a great place if you want to change your career, if you are involved with something that you just don't like at all, if life is just boring you to death, then go give CSB a try. They got a lot of information for you in regards to payments, class schedules, and stuff like that. It's a broad-based curriculum, and you'll learn by doing from the professionals that do these things pretty much every day. So what you need to do is go online to their website, gocsb.com, or place a toll-free phone call, 800-TV-RADIO. Once again, the website, gocsb.com, or just call toll-free, 800-TV-RADIO. And take it from me, I'm a CSB grad. I say it all the time for the people that continue to follow my podcast. If you want to get yourself involved with the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, it's just wonderful, and the people are excellent too. So inquire today. Call toll-free 800-TV-RADIO or go online to their website, gocsb.com. Also, this Crazy Tom Show brought to you by your friends at Liberated Syndication. It's How's My Crazy Tom Show since 2006. And I'll tell you what, Liberated Syndication, they got well over 15,000 podcasts out there. And you can join the fun for as little as $5 a month. I kid you not, my friends. $5 a month just to be a part of Liberated Syndication. And it really is a wonderful website because you can pretty much podcast whatever you'd like and they won't regulate you. All you need to do is pay the monthly fee and you're good to go. Of course, higher charges for more storage that you may need, especially for quality purposes. But here's the great thing about Liberated Syndication. Unlimited bandwidth. There are lots of podcasting places that charge you a fee for a certain amount of bandwidth. Your bandwidth for Libsyn is unlimited, and it comes and it goes with the monthly price. And I pay like a $20 a month fee, especially for the amount that I podcast with, but trust me, it is so worth it for my weekly shows. I know I ramble on for almost an hour and a half at a time, but it really is worth it. So all you need to do for more information, if you want to get into the podcasting fray, check out Libsyn.com today. Of course, my show's on there and so many others as well. It's LIBSYN.com. It's not just the first three letters of the two words Liberated Syndication. My friends, it is podcasting made easy. And may I remind you that the Crazy Tom Show can be found on two different levels, one of which being Libsyn. For any and all archives of my Crazy Tom Show, what you need to do is check out my website at www.crazytom.libsyn.com. Once again, www.crazytom.libsyn.com. If you missed last week's show, it's on there too, so go to my website and check it out. Additionally, if Libsyn doesn't work for you, you can check out iTunes. That's where Crazy Tom is as well. All you need to do is go to iTunes and in the search box type in Crazy Tom Show, and I'm there. Of course, you may need eyeglasses after you see my face, but that goes without saying. Once again, Crazy Tom is on iTunes. Just type in Crazy Tom Show in the search box, and I'm there, and you'll definitely get your stuff. And not only that, you get to subscribe to my show. Whenever a new show comes out, it'll be automatically downloaded to your mobile MP3 Droid, whatever it is, device that you may have. So, once again, Crazy Tom Show. Type it in the search box of iTunes, and you'll find me there. Well, now that I've just rambled on forever, let the bovine excrement hit the ventilation shaft, and let's get a move on with this week's show. Actually, you know what? I take that back. I need to make a statement before I get going with my show because I have a very serious update to share with you. 3 weeks ago, I believe it was in my birthday podcast, I shared with you, of course, the many people who wished me a happy birthday and stuff like that. And before I did that, I shared with you how thankful I am for the life that I live and for the people that surround me. Well, of course there are people who haven't been as fortunate, and I shared a story about a gentleman who was battling a very, very rare form of sarcoma disease. The gentleman's name is Brandon, and I had the pleasure of meeting him, his mother Tammy, and his caretaker when I took them to JFK on one of the most absurd runs I've ever done in my entire life. A run in which my stretch broke down. We had to get a backup stretch in and send them to JFK, but the problem was it was in a snowstorm. It ended up that they ended up missing their flight, and so many bad things happened after which in regards to being rebooked, being charged $450 per ticket on first class to rebook 2 days later. It just seemed like any and everything ended up happening to them. So I ended up taking him to a hotel not too far from JFK, and they did end up going to Hawaii. This past week, and I actually printed out a couple of things to update. On March 21st, Tammy wrote this: I've been really thinking about writing a book, because it's just too much to tell in one testimony. You probably would not believe me if I told you some of the stuff that we have endured since we got to Hawaii. It's unbelievable. It is truly God and Him alone that is holding me, because I would have fainted. I may be bent, but I'm not broken. Now, on March 28th, she wrote this, and this was absolutely devastating. She writes, "Through it all, folks scamming and people stealing money. The churches took offerings for Brandon and never gave them to me. The naturopathic treatment center in Hawaii straight up dogged us, and we received the worst treatment in the world. I promise you this is true, but I want the devil, which is the enemy, to know that I am yet encouraged to run on, because the weapons of my warfare are not carnal, that's flesh and blood, but mighty, that's spiritual, through God. And I have the greater cause. I do my best fighting on my knees through prayer, and through it all, I'm blessed, because God's got this one." Well, in the early morning of March 29th, even though Brandon was doing better the week before, he suffered a severe setback and turned for the worst. And on the early morning hours in Hawaii on March 29th, Brandon passed away. Tammy writes, "He ran the race. He fought a good fight. Now my soldier has gone on home. Rest in paradise, my son." Well, 2 days later, she writes, "As I sit here, I can't stop crying. Today I was planning on bringing my Brandon home with me, but God had other plans for him, so I had to return home without him. And I had to accept what God allowed, but I just asked God to put my heart back together as He strengthens me. Words cannot be uttered right now as to how I feel, but God is faithful and He is just. So I ask my family, don't tell me to be strong. You be strong for me. And pray that I be strengthened to continue this journey that I've set before me. And thank you all for all of your prayers." Well, I wanted to pass this announcement to you that a memorial service will be held on Monday, April the 8th for Brandon. And this information is for people that need to take off work in advance and, of course, for those who are traveling out of town. The time and location of the service has not been put up yet. What I would strongly recommend you do is please go to facebook.com/Brandon's Song, which is where you can find a lot of information in regards on how you can donate to his cause. And even though Brandon may no longer be here on this earth, of course his legacy will live on. And there are others who may have the same condition as he went through. So I please ask of you to check out facebook.com/Brandon's Song, BRANDONSSONG, and you'll find donation information as well as information as to his memorial or funeral service. They call it a going home service, which is fine as well. It's the same thing. They, of course, will give the information on there. I do not have that in front of me at this time. So please, once again, make sure you check out facebook.com/Brandon's Song for all the details. Like I said, for funeral services, for donating to his cause. Obviously, they're accepting donations in regards to his memory. And of course, I know flowers are being sent, stuff, but of course many families are like, rather than send flowers, you can make a donation to a particular charity and what have you. So, again, best thing to do is check out facebook.com/Brandon Song for all the information. And from myself, from Donna, from my son Danny, of course, the people I work with from my limo company, and from everybody who, of course, knows me, we all, from the Crazy Tom Show, send our deepest condolences to Tammy and, of course, the family of Brandon, whom, like I said, passed away very early morning hours of March 29th. He's in a better place now, and he's no longer suffering, but we promise to continue running for him. If you have not seen the video, you can type in "Running for My Life" on YouTube and you will find Brandon's video. It is extremely graphic where the tumor was and what he had to deal with. And trust me, I know firsthand after seeing that it is extremely gruesome to watch, but you definitely need to understand what he had to go through. And I could not believe that I met him during the last 3 weeks of his life. And that tells you right there, tomorrow is never promised. So, on behalf of the Crazy Tom Show, we will dedicate this show in Brandon's memory, and of course to Tammy Wright, who has, of course, fought an incredible battle, had endured so much over the last few months. We, of course, are praying for you guys, and we will all be strong for you. So I just want to share that announcement. Now I will go ahead and start the show. Now, we begin this show in a very disturbing way. And we have to take you to New Brunswick, New Jersey for this one. We open this Crazy Tom High Five with a very, very disturbing story. Now, for those of you who are not really into college basketball, you probably heard this story a lot over this last week. And this involved former Rutgers head coach Mike Rice, head coach for the men's basketball crew, who was in the Big East the last few years, and now they're no longer a part of it. Well, a few months ago, the athletic director for Rutgers saw a tape of one of his practices where the head coach was taking basketballs and basically throwing it at his players. I mean, this is not a hard pass. I mean, this was like basically bazooka passing. I was firing at his players. Basically, there was some physical contact between the coach and players. On top of which, he was even found to have used, unfortunately, an alternative or quote-unquote offensive gay slur against one of the players. Now, that tape ended up airing this week on ESPN's Outside the Lines. And of course, after that tape was aired, the entire world took notice. A few months ago, Rice was suspended for 3 games by the university and fined $50,000 for that particular conduct. Well, now that the Extreme 8 is all done, well, there was a gentleman named Eric Murdoch, a former NBA basketball player, and he actually played for the Milwaukee Bucks from 1992 to 1995. Now, I got this information from a Milwaukee sports radio station, 1250 WSSP in Milwaukee, and they wrote this in regards to Eric Murdoch. It was former Bucks guard Eric Murdoch who blew the whistle on Rutgers basketball coach Mike Rice, who was fired on Tuesday. Murdoch, who was hired as an assistant in 2010, was not renewed last year. Murdoch provided the athletic director the videotape of practices showing Rice assault his players. The athletic director and campus president only suspended Rice, and as I said, fined him $50,000. It wasn't until those tapes surfaced on ESPN's Outside the Lines program, and they were the lead news story that morning, that Rice got fired. If Eric Murdoch, who was about to file a lawsuit for wrongful termination, had not given those tapes to the media, the Rutgers cover-up would have continued. And can you imagine Rutgers being in a major, major story for the 3rd time in less than 10 years? Go back to, I believe it was 2006 or 2007. I forget, that was the year that Imus died. Don Imus, of course, who was longtime morning show host of Sports Radio 66 WFAN in New York, he used, shall we say, inappropriate language against the Rutgers women's basketball team. And, of course, that team made it, I think, as far, I'm not sure if it was the Extreme 8 or Final 4 before losing, but Rutgers ended up having inappropriate language used against them by the public media. And Don Imus, who happened to be the one that used those words, ended up eventually crumbling, and CBS Radio eventually fired Don Imus once all the sponsorship for his show ended up going down the drain. And to me, I thought that was a very unfair firing on Don Imus, because it basically goes to show you have to be perfect in order to survive the corrupt corporate media industry. And now you see why I'm not in it, based on what I talked about with you guys last week. So you had the inappropriate language describing the Rutgers women's basketball team, 2006-2007, I think it was. Then a couple of years later, we had a man from a dorm secretly videotaping two men in an intimate moment in the bedroom. The video surfaced, of course, and went viral, went all over the place. One of the gentlemen found out about it, basically was so distraught, he ended up killing himself by jumping off the George Washington Bridge. And now we have this incident. Rutgers University has not been looked at in a very great light. Now, you have to think about it this way. Some people think Mike Rice didn't do anything wrong. But go back to 10 years or so ago when Bobby Knight was fired by Indiana. Now, he was a very hard-nosed coach. And yes, he said things that were inappropriate. Yes, he did some things physically that were not appropriate to his players. But the man won 3 national championships in 1976, 81, and 1987. And even though he got a couple of other jobs after that, he was not the same. Unfortunately, this world has eventually progressed into one in where we've become a bit of a sissy. But in today's world, you cannot really change what the unwritten rules are. And unfortunately, those unwritten rules are the most followed and basically determine how you are supposed to live your life. Because if you do one thing wrong, you will never, ever be forgiven for it as long as you live. And that's a godforsaken truth. I do not think Mike Rice is going to get another college basketball job after this. Considering human beings have 2 eyes, Rutgers has a 3rd eye that's still blind. And now all 3 eyes are black. That's 3 major black eyes to Rutgers University in a matter of 7 years. But once more, it's also college corruption at its finest. Why wasn't Rice fired once the athletic director saw that video? I have no idea why, and there must have been something that went on behind the scenes that allowed him to stay. I've gotten other comments about this, and I'll read a few of them to you. Antonio from Baltimore stated, "Here's the problem. Murdoch, the athletic director, knew this was going on, but he remained silent until he didn't get renewed. Had he been renewed, would he have said anything?" I thought this was rather interesting. Nick in Paulsboro, New Jersey stated, "This wasn't a cover-up. He got suspended after the athletic director saw the video in season and was fined. The AD considered firing him then, but didn't. Murdoch got mad and released us. It's not a cover-up, but maybe it was the wrong punishment initially." Christian up in Little Falls, New Jersey says, "The problem is Mike Rice was an abusive tyrant. It doesn't matter how it came out. It doesn't change the fact that it would eventually come out and the coach would have been fired. Even selfish motives cannot corrupt the truth this time. Rice is a menace and needs to be stopped, and had to be stopped for that matter." And I thought those were very interesting comments in regards to the incident. Now, my personal opinion, Rice should have been fired anyway. Even if he wasn't an abusive coach, you have to understand, Rutgers, we thought was going to be an up-and-coming program. Well, considering he did rather well at Robert Morris, where he used to be, he tried putting his act together at Rutgers, and guess what? He flopped in 3 seasons. The coach had a losing record. 3 years in a losing record with no real improvement? Rutgers 5-13 in the Big East this year? Well, all I have to say about that is you need a better coach. And now, considering Rutgers making a transition from the Big East to the Big Ten, them and Maryland, and now going up against opponents as Michigan, Michigan State, Indiana, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Minnesota, those types of programs that have been so good this year for the Big Ten as far as their conference is concerned, Rutgers needs to take 2013 and 14 to really settle their program down and know what the heck they're doing. Because now the Big Ten's becoming what? The Big 14? So you're going to have 7 teams basically in each division. In my mind, this is a time for Rutgers to really seriously make some changes. Firing Mike Rice was the right thing. Not just because he was abusive to his players, but you have to remember too, you can't put your hands on a player. You just can't. 30 years ago it was acceptable. Today, it is not. And that is how sensitive we have become when it comes to a subject matter like this. But more importantly, Mike Rice had a losing record in the Big East all 3 years. He couldn't compete with the Georgetowns and the Syracuse and the Pitts and the Louisvilles and the Villanovas. He couldn't. He just could not. Rutgers is not a basketball school. If they were really to put themselves on the map, they would rebuild that athletic center and make it a 16,000 seat plus or more arena and take this seriously. They did this with football. They got a beautiful 53,000 seat stadium right outside New Brunswick. But now, they need to do more. I know football is the premise for everything when it comes to finances, especially in collegiate institutions. Academics always gets trumped by the money that athletics pours in. And I still think to this day that is just flat out wrong. But to me, this is a time for a change. Rutgers did the right thing. And it may very well be that Eric Murdoch did the right thing sending those tapes to ESPN. But you wonder about the timing of it too. There isn't much going on. There's a Final Four I'll be talking about in just a couple of minutes that'll be taking place in Atlanta this weekend. In my honest opinion, maybe this was timed so that ESPN has something to talk about. And maybe Eric Murdoch released those tapes to ESPN right after Rutgers was bounced out of the Big East tournament. But ESPN intentionally withheld them for a couple weeks just so now they have something to talk about, and this has now become a national cover story. And yet again, another embarrassment to the State University of New Jersey. And I understand now, I'm getting this text message, my friend Dean out in Torrance, California, he always sends me ESPN updates, and I personally cannot believe that I got this just in. Let me see if I can find this real quick, so stay with me here. I've received word that Rutgers assistant Jimmy Martelli has resigned as well. He was shown on the video shoving and berating players. Holy mackerel. So the fallout is starting. And there are administrators, there are teachers, there are alumni. They are calling for even more resignations. A lot of people are calling for the Rutgers athletic director to resign. Others have gone as far as wanting the president and chancellor to resign as well. But in the days and weeks to come, it might just happen. We don't know if it will, but just a very unfortunate story in New Brunswick. And like I said, maybe this is the best thing to happen to Rutgers, because now, when it comes to their basketball program and merging into the Big Ten, this could be a time for maybe a revival for college basketball. We shall see what happens. The AD chicken and Mike Rice and the Murdoch whistleblower that got this thing rolling. That's part one of my Crazy Tom High Five for this week. In part two of my Crazy Tom High Five, I go from the unfortunate situation at Rutgers to college basketball itself, and of course the men's Final Four, which will be held in Atlanta this weekend at the Georgia Dome. Now, this will be the first time the Georgia Dome will get the new, configuration of the Final Four, because when they've had Final Fours before, they were able to seat about 40,000 people for each one. Now that stadiums are pretty much interchangeable when it comes to going from football to concert events to even college basketball, Atlanta will probably see about 75,000 people for the national semis and the national championship, of course, coming on Monday. Now, just going to the regional winners, the East winner was Syracuse. Syracuse surprised Indiana, who was a top 5 team pretty much all year. Indiana did not have a good matchup with Syracuse, and Jim Boeheim did his job, winning by 11 points over Indiana, thus blowing up my national championship prediction. Happens every year, but guess what? The good news is I didn't put $1 on the tournament this year, so at least I didn't lose anything. I'm thankful for that. Indiana, of course, you have to remember, they lost like 6 games in their conference, the Big Ten, because the conference was just so strong. But Syracuse has been on quite a run lately, and Indiana just did not have an answer for Syracuse. Now, Syracuse went on to play Marquette. Marquette, I just wanted to say, they were in the Extreme 8 thanks to beating Miami of Florida. They came off a bad game and then had an even worse game, and Marquette, I believe, won by like 8 points. So Miami of Florida, I believe, had their best basketball season ever, winners of the ACC tournament, but once again couldn't get out of the Sweet 16 as they had reached back in 2000. So Marquette won, and that brought up the Extreme 8 battle for the East title between Syracuse and Marquette. And as it turns out, Syracuse was no match for Marquette, or was it really the other way around? Marquette was no match for Syracuse, because Syracuse, they played close till about 10 minutes till time, and Syracuse then built a bigger lead and ran away, I believe winning by 20 points over Marquette, and they get to their first Final Four in 10 years. Yes, the Carmelo Anthony 2003 Syracuse Orangemen were last in the Final Four in 2003, and of course that year they beat Kansas in the national championship game. I remember that well because I did a little promo assignment for the Connecticut School of Broadcasting in the class I was in. I was running through a sports desk thing, and Carmelo Anthony, which I called him Carmelo Yellow, I don't know why anyone else didn't think of that, but he hit 6 3-pointers in the first half, and then Syracuse had to hold off a late Kansas charge, and Jim Boeheim won a national championship in New Orleans. And it was his only one, but it was an incredible moment for Carmelo. He wins a national championship, and then he leaves to go to the Denver Nuggets. Go figure that one out. So Syracuse won the East. Well, who won the South? Well, get this. It was Michigan. And what a tremendous series of games, at least for the most part, in Dallas-Fort Worth at Cowboys Stadium. Well, we had, of course, Florida facing Florida Gulf Coast, and this was a game where Florida Gulf Coast got out to, once again, a big lead. They had like a 10-point lead, but then all of a sudden they couldn't hit their shots. And when I saw that, I was like, I'm going to bed. They're not winning this game. Well, how right I was. Florida eventually picked Gulf Coast apart and went on to win, I think, by 12 points over Florida Gulf Coast. And give Florida Gulf Coast a lot of credit. I mean, they pulled off the biggest stunner in a long time by defeating Georgetown in Philadelphia at the Wells Fargo Center, and then went on to beat San Diego State, which was even more impressive, and they won both games by 10 points or more. So you have to give these guys credit. The problem is, it only takes a statement game for your head coach to no longer be at the university. And for Florida Gulf Coast, they won 2 games as a number 15 seed. Nobody had ever done that before. So, because Florida Gulf Coast did it, the punishment was Gulf Coast went back down on the totem pole. Because the head coach, I forget his name, resigned just a couple of days later to take the USC basketball position. Well, hey, you win 2 basketball games in the NCAA tournament, that's an automatic Beyonce upgrade you. He goes from a job where he's paid over $150,000 a year to a job where he's getting paid almost $1.5 million a year. So you go from the Atlantic Sun to the Pac-12, well, there's your answer right there. It's always money. But I mean, when you're being paid $150,000 and you have an incredible feat like this, obviously, that's rags to riches right there. I mean, obviously, you got to consider, of course, you want to stay at Florida Gulf Coast. I mean, if USC only offered $300,000, I would have stayed at Florida Gulf Coast. But it's 10 times the money. $1.5 million a year. That is a serious raise. And obviously, you got to go where the money is, especially these days with the economy. Of course, people would love Florida Gulf Coast. The biggest problem is they're from the Atlantic Sun Conference. So why in the blue hell would you want to stay if you get wowed with an offer like that? So Florida Gulf Coast, we may not hear from them for a very long time, but we will never forget what they accomplished in the NCAA tournament. So Florida went on to play Michigan, who was involved in probably one of the greatest basketball games you'll ever see. It was a game against Kansas where Kansas actually had a big lead for a while. But then in the last few minutes, Michigan chipped away, and then one of their players in the last 10 seconds of regulation hit like a 30-foot three-pointer and tied the game, sending the game to extra time, in which Michigan eventually won thanks to a last-second prayer thrown up by Kansas, ended up missing badly. So Michigan, who ended up having 2 easy games in their home court at the Palace of Auburn Hills, had one of their biggest challenges, and they ended up beating top seed Kansas. And to me, that by far is the greatest game in this year's NCAA tournament. Not because of how dramatic the game was, but on top of which, this was the only game out of the 64 that have been played so far that's gone to extra time. That's a rarity in this tournament. Somebody's going to have to look up fewest overtime games in an NCAA tournament since the field expanded to 64 in 1985. I'll find that rather interesting because now it's a maximum of 4. Because they have 2 national semi-games and a national championship. They could all go overtime, but you only had 1 in your first 64 games. I thought that's rather striking. But then Michigan played Florida for the South Regional Final, and Michigan wiped them out. Florida had no answer, and Michigan, yep, they go on to the Final Four, and they win by like 20 over Billy Donovan and the Florida Gators. So Michigan is back on the basketball map. Now remember, they of course hadn't been heard of since 1994, when I think that was the last time they got in the Final Four. And of course, their big hype days was when the Fab Five, Jalen Rose, Chris Webber, and all those people, they of course played for Michigan. They were together for 1 year, went to the national championship game before losing to North Carolina with the infamous Webber timeout in the final seconds of the game. Talk about great brain cramp, there you go. But Michigan now will be playing Syracuse in one of the national semifinal games. The other national semifinal, I'll give you the teams. Wichita State, whom many say really isn't a Cinderella, but the fact that they're from the Missouri Valley Conference and that they're a number 9 seed, them defeating LaSalle in the West Regional semis, and then of course, excuse me, of course winning in the Extreme 8 over Ohio State. Ohio State beat Arizona to get to that game. Wichita State led by as many as 20 points in that contest. But you knew Ohio State and their history of corruption was going to get them back into the game. They ended up having a very furious rally and ended up cutting a 20-point deficit down to 3. But then one of the Wichita State players made a huge 3 with like 2 minutes left, and Ohio State just could not get over the top and ended up losing 70-66, allowing Wichita State to make the Final Four for the first time, I think, since like the 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. So congratulations to Wichita State. you guys made the NCAA tournament worth watching this year, because the Missouri Valley Conference is not a major conference, but they're going to the Final Four. So because a major conference got shut out, the NCAA's losing a little bit of money. That's why they were screaming bloody murder when Ohio State couldn't get the comeback. And they were polling for a comeback from a marketing standpoint. Wichita State, though, unfortunately, will be playing by far the best team in the tournament, Louisville. Louisville, of course, won their Sweet 16 game rather easily, and then went on into the Extreme 8 to play Duke. Duke, of course, had won over Michigan State by 10 and Tom Izzo, and Mike Krzyzewski just has Tom Izzo's number. They played, I think, 9 times, and Duke's only lost 1 time to Michigan State since Tom Izzo's been head coach, so that's quite an accomplishment. But then comes the Extreme 8, and I will mention a particular incident, and this will lead into one of my normal segments of the show in just a second. Duke and Louisville went back and forth for a half, and Duke went up by as many as like 4 or 5 points, and then Kentucky, they ride to take a short lead at the half. But then the second half, slowly but surely, Louisville got hot, and Duke got cold. So if I mention Kentucky, I apologize. They lost to Robert Morris. I don't think they even deserve to be in the no-interest tournament. But anyway, Louisville ended up building a big lead, and they were making shot after shot while Duke went over 8 minutes without a field goal. And that 3-point lead ballooned to as many as 16, and in the end, Louisville won by 22 points over Duke. So Louisville ended up winning the Southeast region, and they end up playing Wichita State in, I think, one of the Final Four matchups. I'm not sure if the Louisville-Wichita State game's first or if Syracuse-Michigan is first, but those 2 games, of course, begin around the 5:30, 6 o'clock hour in Atlanta. Now, let's go back to the Louisville-Duke game, and, of course, one major incident that occurred around the halfway point of the first half. An absolutely gruesome injury to 6th man for Louisville guard Kevin Ware. He actually was trying to defend a shot, and as he tried to land along the side of the floor in Indianapolis, he fell down and his leg broke in 2. In fact, the injury was so gruesome that the bone actually went through his skin. A compound fracture of his leg, and unbelievably, I mean, he was in a lot of pain, but he just told the Louisville players, win the game. But while that moment was happening, people on both sides of the court, Louisville and Duke, were actually in tears. I mean, even one unconfirmed report had a couple players throwing up behind the bench. That's how gruesome the injury was. CBS only showed the replay 1 time after it happened because of how absolutely gruesome the broken leg was. And I don't know what to actually tell you, but people have joked by saying the broken leg surrounded by a large cast. But in this situation, you just can't make a joke out of it. I then heard a couple of nights later, Maxine Talbot of the Flyers broke his leg in a game against the Capitals. So now he's out the rest of the year pretty much. And then somebody else suffered a broken leg. It seems like everything else just comes in threes. And I just could not believe how horrendous that injury was. I saw the replay. I mean, it was, my stomach, it really turned when I saw it. Now, I need to lead into my segment known as What Drives Me Crazy, because I need to say something regarding this. There were people putting pictures up on Kevin Ware's broken leg, and as a matter of fact, a photo leaked out into the social media world that showed the knee being completely open and the bone totally sticking out of Kevin Ware's leg while he was on the operating table. And to me, I thought that was more of an invasion of privacy on Kevin's part than anything else. Now, I tried to look up highlights courtesy of a few people who have put things up, but CBS immediately took it down from YouTube and basically place a copyright infringement. But other independent places showed the replay. In fact, Yahoo actually showed a still image of the leg and where it was. But people were putting that image of Kevin Ware's broken leg in the hospital up on the sites and sharing them with people. And to me, that is just wrong. I mean, there are a lot of people who have weak stomachs out there. I don't necessarily have a strong one myself when it comes to looking at true gruesome photos. But in my mind, that was just flat out wrong. Why would anyone do something like that? And furthermore, why would anybody go into somebody's privacy? I mean, the man suffered a broken leg. Who knows if he's ever going to play basketball again? Who knows how serious the injury is? Now, I'm thankful to God that he is out of the hospital and in Atlanta, and he probably will be in pretty much a sweet box to cheer on Louisville as they play in the men's Final Four. I'm sure that's going to be a very, very emotional moment for Louisville Cardinals, whom I think are probably going to win a national championship given the teams that are left. Syracuse will certainly be a threat. Michigan, I'm sure, will be a threat, but Louisville's too strong. They're playing their best basketball at the right time. I just feel that placing a poor man's injury with his bones sticking out and having people look at it when they really didn't have a choice, to me, that should be flagged. And I didn't particularly care for that at all. I mean, you just can't do that. I mean, I understand public domain and stuff like that, but here's a guy's livelihood and the intrusion that our world has gotten into by way of the broken leg. And this is one of those moments where the family's just got to say, respect their privacy. Let this guy recover. But it's such a major event now everyone wants to talk about. And now everybody has a major distraction. I'll give you a for instance. We had all this talk about gay marriage and equality in the last week and a half. While that was going on, Obama signed a deal in regards to protecting Monsanto and all these little genetic chemicals now that are in food that'll now be more harmful to you when you eat. And nobody talks about that. We're saturated and distracted by the wrong things. And that to me is just very disturbing. And I just don't understand it. So there you have it. The men's Final Four and the broken leg. And what drives me crazy about Kevin Ware's broken leg now being a national story and people wanting to see how he broke it, why he broke it, and even a still image of him on a gurney and his knee being wide open. I mean, we don't need that. I'm telling you, we do not need that. Leave the guy alone. Let him recover. He's got a family. And wouldn't you want your privacy if you had a broken leg and this happened to you? Sometimes you just gotta flip mode the situation so you can understand. If I had a broken leg, why would anyone want to see my bone coming out of my leg? I mean, for goodness sake. That's just wrong. I mean, respect other people's privacy. But then again, privacy laws, I mean, they exist, but only for those whom matter. I mean, everyone matters. So respect this privacy. You got that image up. Get it out of there. But unfortunately, it's too much like wildfire that it's going to be up forever in some way. That's just wrong. The Final Four and the broken leg. Ugh. To even have an image of that is just bad enough. But still, it's part 2 of my Crazy Time High Five for this week. Oh, one other quick note I forgot to mention, that most recent portion of my Crazy Tom show, the Florida Gulf Coast head coach's name was Andy Enfield. And I said that he was the one being paid just over $150,000 per season by the school. Of course, now going to USC, his salary went tenfold to $1.5 million. So, it's Andy Enfield. I didn't think of the name, but coming across in between sections, I wanted to at least make that clarification. Before we go into part 3, gotta give a couple crazy shouts out to a couple people this week who have milestone birthdays to celebrate. First of all, to Denise Natriello, who I don't know if she's like in New Jersey or anything like that, but she's celebrating a milestone. My friend Stacy in Hamilton is also celebrating a milestone birthday this week. So many happy returns to you guys, and hope your birthdays go very well and that nobody hides the cake on you. Additionally, we had Ed from Ohio check in. Janice out in Chicago, she also checked in as well for my Crazy Tom show. And I also want to make this mention. I do this every single podcast. There's always one little tidbit that I mention about women's fraternity Zeta Tau Alpha, and I want to do this here for a very good reason. I understand that on Monday, the chapter that started Zeta Tau Alpha back at the end of the 19th century will be recolonized and reactivated into service. Yes, the Alpha chapter of Zeta Tau Alpha, which is at a university where basically the Greek system started for females back in the late 19th century. Of course, you have Kappa Delta, you have Alpha Sigma Alpha, you have Sigma Sigma Sigma, and of course, from October 15th of 1898, you have Zeta Tau Alpha. And it all started at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, way back yonder. And now, for I believe a second time, they're being recolonized and resuscitated, and they will be back into action. So, wanted to send my sincerest congratulations to Zeta Tau Alpha and the original Alpha chapter that started it all at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia. Like I said, their ceremonies are on Monday. Of course, there's more news about it. You can go to zetataualpha.org for more information on that. So again, congratulations to Longwood University and the Alpha chapter of Women's Fraternity Zeta Tau Alpha, who will be recolonizing come on Monday. So I'm sure it's going to be a very exciting event for a lot of people, and of course in all Zeta Nation. So crazy shouts and congratulations to all of you. Now, as I go into part 3 of my Crazy Tom High Five, I'm going to revisit an issue that I talked about I'd say a couple of months ago, and I kind of ran down a list of people and shootings and what drugs the people were on. Well, as I went down the list of stories I wanted to take from the website, of course, run by Michael Rivera, whatreallyhappened.com, and of course I mentioned him too in my podcast, there was one that he brought up which got resuscitated courtesy of a website called ammoland.com. And there is an article in that website written by Dan Roberts. Well, after this article was posted on that website, immediately Google defined that website as a threat to every search engine and basically was censored by the search engines itself. So ammoland.com you cannot find on Google. And there's a reason why. Because cover-ups of cover-ups, just like Rutgers University tried to do, we have this thing. This article, written by Dan Roberts of ammoland.com, reveals the real truth about mass shootings that bureaucrats and lawmakers are choosing to sweep under the rug, and that's psychiatric drugs. If you want to know the real reason why mass shootings are taking place, this is the inconvenient truth that the media won't cover. Now, as part of a collective grassroots effort to defend the Bill of Rights against usurpers and tyrants, Natural News, which republished this article, is republishing it without asking for permission first. Now, usually you have to get express written consent. When it comes to fighting tyrants and defending liberty, the unstated agreement across the entire liberty-loving grassroots community is use our articles, help spread the word. And every article that's written on Natural News, that can be reprinted with credit and a link back to the original source article on naturalnews.com. So therefore, this article is basically kind of like one that was brought up some months ago and basically republished to kind of remind everybody as to what really is going on. Because as we talk about these mass shootings that have been taking place a lot, especially in the last couple of decades, this week, Connecticut and Maryland signed into law legislation having some major changes as far as purchasing guns and ammunition, stuff like that. Now, keep in mind, too, about the Department of Homeland Security and their purchase of ammunition. So we have a little bit of a problem here. We have interesting irony when it's like you have to ban guns, and you have to ban this, that, and the other, and ammunition, and you have to look in every piece of ammunition, and yet we have the U.S. government purchasing that for using what? I do not know. But here's the article by Dan Roberts, courtesy of AmmoLand.com once again. Nearly every mass shooting incident in the last 20 years and multiple other instances of suicide and isolated shootings all share one thing in common, and it's not the weapons used. The overwhelming evidence points to the single largest common factor in all of these incidents. It's the fact that all the perpetrators are either actively taking powerful psychotropic drugs or had been at some point in the immediate past before they committed their crimes. Multiple credible scientific studies go back more than a decade, as well as internal documents from certain pharmaceutical companies that suppress the information, show that SSRI drugs, now again, SSRI stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, have well-known but unreported side effects, including but not limited to suicide and other violent behavior. One need only Google relevant keywords or phrases to see for themselves. There's a website that I've also mentioned called ssristories.com, and it's one popular site that has documented over 4,500 mainstream media reported cases from around the world of aberrant or violent behavior by those taking these powerful drugs. Now, Dan goes on and lists a bunch of mass shooting perpetrators and the drugs they were taking or had been taking shortly before the horrific actions were compiled and published to Facebook by a gentleman named John Novesk, the founder and owner of Novesk Rifle Works, just days before he was mysteriously killed in a single-car accident. Is there a link between Novesk's death and his outing of information numerous disparate parties would prefer to suppress for a variety of reasons? Well, that's going to be left to the individual readers to decide. But there is most certainly a documented history of people who quote-unquote knew too much or were considered a threat, dying under extraordinarily suspicious circumstances. Take these for example. From Catherine Smith, a Tennessee Division of Motor Vehicles worker who was somehow involved with several September 11th hijackers obtaining Tennessee driver's licenses and was later found burned to death in her car. To Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Gary Webb, who exposed a CIA operation in the 1980s that resulted in the flooding of the streets in Los Angeles with crack cocaine and was later found dead from 2 gunshot wounds to the head, but was officially ruled a suicide. To Frank Olson, a senior research microbiologist who was working on the CIA's mind control research program, MK-Ultra. Now, after Olson expressed his desire to leave the program, he was with a CIA agent in a New York hotel room and is alleged to have committed suicide by throwing himself off the 10th floor balcony. Well, in 1994, Olson's sons were successful in their efforts to have their father's body exhumed and re-examined in a second autopsy by James Starrs, professor of law and forensic science at the Natural Law Center at George Washington University in D.C. Starr's team concluded that the blunt force trauma to the head and injury to the chest had not occurred during the fall, but most likely in the room before the fall. The evidence was called rankly and starkly suggestive of homicide. Based on his findings, in 1996, the Manhattan District Attorney opened a homicide investigation into Olson's death, but was unable to find enough evidence to bring charges. Another cover-up, huh? Well, as mentioned, gotta leave it up to the readers and listeners to make up their own minds if Novesk suffered a similar fate. Now to the list of mass shooters and a stark link to psychotropic drugs. And there are plenty of them, so let's go one at a time. Of course, one of the highest profile cases ever. 17-year-old Eric Harris, who was on Zoloft then Luvox, and Dylan Klebold, the 18-year-old, both of them from Columbine, and of course involved in that mass school shooting in 1999 in Littleton, Colorado. They killed 12 students and a teacher, wounded 23 others before killing themselves. Get this, folks. Klebold's medical records have never been made available to the public. 16-year-old Jeff Weiss had been prescribed 60 milligrams a day of Prozac, which is 3 times the average starting dose for adults. That was when he shot his grandfather, his grandfather's girlfriend, and many fellow students at Red Lake, Minnesota. He then shot himself, and in the end, 10 were dead and 12 were wounded. 16-year-old Corey Basgard from Waluke High School in Washington State. He was on Paxil, which caused him to have hallucinations when he took a rifle to his high school and held 23 classmates hostage. He has no memory of the event. 13-year-old Chris Fetters killed his favorite aunt while taking Prozac. 12-year-old Christopher Pittman murdered both of his grandparents while taking Zoloft. 13-year-old Matthew Miller hung himself in his bedroom closet after taking Zoloft for 6 days. 15-year-old Kip Kinkle, who was on Prozac and Ritalin, shot his parents while they slept, then went to school and opened fire, killing 2 classmates and injuring 22 shortly after beginning Prozac treatment. 16-year-old Luke Woodham, who was on Prozac, killed his mother, then killed 2 students and wounded 6. An unnamed boy in Pocatello, Idaho in 1998. He was on Zoloft and had a Zoloft-induced seizure that caused an armed standoff at his school. 14-year-old Michael Carneal, who was on Ritalin, opened fire on students at a high school prayer meeting in West Paducah, Kentucky. 3 teenagers were killed and 5 were wounded. An unnamed man in Huntsville, Alabama, who was on Ritalin, went psychotic, went psychotic, chopping up his parents with an axe and also killing 1 sibling and almost murdering another. 11-year-old Andrew Golden, who was on Ritalin, and 14-year-old Mitchell Johnson, who also was on Ritalin, shot 15 people, killing 4 students, a teacher, and wounding 10 others. 15-year-old T.J. Solomon, a high school student in Conyers, Georgia, who was on Ritalin, opened fire and wounded 6 of his classmates. 14-year-old Rod Matthews, who was on Ritalin, beat a classmate to death with a bat. 19-year-old James Wilson, who was on various psychotic drugs. He's from Greenwood, South Carolina, and he took a .22 caliber revolver into an elementary school, killed 2 young girls, and wounded 7 other children and 2 teachers. Ugh. This ain't good. But there's still a whole lot more. 13-year-old Elizabeth Bush was on Paxil and was responsible for a school shooting in Pennsylvania. Jason Hoffman, who was on Effexor and Celexa, he was involved in a school shooting in El Cajon, California. 15-year-old Jared Victor, who was on Paxil. After 5 days of being on Paxil, he stabbed his grandmother 61 times. 15-year-old Chris Shanahan, who was on Paxil. He lives in Rigby, Idaho, and out of the blue, killed a woman. Jeff Franklin, from Huntsville, Alabama, who was on Prozac and Ritalin, killed his parents as they came home from work using a sledgehammer, hatchet, butcher knife, and mechanic's file, then attacked his younger brothers and sister. Neil Furrow, who was on Prozac, went to a Louisiana Jewish school, in a Jewish school shooting, reported to have court-ordered to be on Prozac along with several other medications. 14-year-old Kevin Ryder was withdrawing from Prozac when he died from a gunshot wound to the head. Initially it was ruled a suicide, but 2 years later, the investigation into his death was opened as a possible homicide. The prime suspect, also 14 years of age, had been taking Zoloft and other SSRI antidepressants. 13-year-old Alex Kim hung himself shortly after his Lexapro prescription had been doubled. Diane Ruthier was prescribed Welburton for gallstone problems. 6 days later, after suffering many adverse effects of the drug, she shot herself. Billy Wilcom and a wrestler and a University of Florida student was prescribed Prozac at the age of 17. His family found him dead of suicide, hanging from a tall ladder at the family's Gulf Shore Boulevard home back in July of 2002. 12-year-old Kara J. Ann Fuller-Otter was on Paxil when she hung herself from a hook in her closet. Kara's parents said, "The damn doctor wouldn't take her off it, and I asked him to when he went in on the second visit. I told him I thought she was having some sort of reaction to Paxil." 18-year-old Gareth Christian from Vancouver was on Paxil when he committed suicide in 2002. Gareth's father could not accept his son's death, and he killed himself. 17-year-old Julie Woodward was on Zoloft when she hung herself in her family's detached garage. Matthew Miller was 13 when he saw a psychiatrist because he was having difficulty at school. The psychiatrist gave him samples of Zoloft. 7 days later, his mother found him dead, hanging by a belt from a laundry hook in his closet. 18-year-old Kurt Dash, who was on Prozac, killed his father with a shotgun. He's now behind prison bars and writes letters trying to warn the world that SSRI drugs can kill. A 37-year-old person named Woody committed suicide while in his 5th week of taking Zoloft. Shortly before his death, his physician suggested doubling the dose of the drug. He had seen his physician only for insomnia. He had never been depressed, nor did he have any history of any mental illness symptoms. A 10-year-old boy from Houston shot and killed his father after his Prozac dosage was increased. 15-year-old Hamad Memon shot and killed a fellow middle school student. He had been diagnosed with ADHD and depression and was taking Zoloft and other drugs for the conditions. Madi Sari, a 22-year-old culinary student, shot and killed 9 students and a teacher and wounded another student before killing himself. Sari was taking an SSRI and a benzodiazepine. 27-year-old Steven Kazmierczak shot and killed 5 people and wounded 21 others before killing himself in a Northern Illinois University auditorium. According to his girlfriend, he had recently been taking Prozac, Xanax, and Ambien. Toxicology results showed that he still had trace amounts of Xanax in his system. 18-year-old Finnish gunman Pekka Erik Alvlin. I'm sure you remember him. He had been taking antidepressants before he killed 8 people and wounded a dozen more at Jokela High School, and then he committed suicide. 2 more. 14-year-old Asa Kuhn from Cleveland shot and wounded 4 before taking his own life, and court records show Kuhn was on trazodone. Lastly, Joe Romano, a 16-year-old on medication for depression, fired a shotgun at a teacher in his New York high school. Missing from this list are 3 or 4 others known to have been taking these same medications. And this poses these fair follow-up questions along the same lines. What drugs was Jared Lee Loughner on, the 21-year-old who killed 6 people and injured 14 others in Tucson, Arizona, the infamous Gabrielle Gifford story? What drugs was James Egan Holmes on, the 24-year-old who killed 12 people and injured 59 others in the infamous Dark Knight shootings of Aurora, Colorado? What drugs was Jacob Tyler Roberts on, the 22-year-old who killed 2 and injured 1 in Clackamas, Oregon? And in most recent times, what drugs was Adam Peter Lanza on, the 20-year-old who killed 26 and wounded 2 in Newtown, Connecticut? Those focusing on further firearms bans or magazine restrictions are clearly focusing on the wrong issue and asking the wrong questions, either as a deliberate attempt to hide these links or out of complete and utter ignorance. You just can't let them. Force our elected representatives and the media to cast a harsh spotlight on this issue, and don't stop hounding them until they do. It's going to be a long time before that happens, unfortunately, but you know what? May not be a bad idea to kind of do more research. So anytime you hear of a shooting in where so many people are dead or injured, ask this question first. what antidepressant medications or SSRIs is the shooter on? I'm telling you, you need to wake up on this, because the media cannot tell you the story and then you claim it as fact, when in reality they're covering up for the pharmaceutical companies who do not want this out. So talk to people who are in Ortho McNeil or Johnson & Johnson or Merck or Pfizer or anything like that, and ask them those questions, because the public has the right to know. Revisiting the mass school shootings and the antidepressant drugs that go with it. That's part 3 of my Crazy Town High 5 for this week. We go now to part 4 of my Crazy Town High 5, and I want to at least give you something of the radio station WTF variety. Well, I got it for you. I usually talk about the serious issues that the media refuses to talk about. But then you get these wahoo spending that just does not add up, and you wonder where the money's going to. Well, I have this wonderful story out of India in where you are going to go batty over this. Here's the headline for this story. Indian study reveals male bats perform oral sex on females. I kid you not. This is courtesy of digitaljournal.com, which is a global digital media network. Well, here it is. And pardon me for being very explicit on what the writing is about, but I'm going to read it to you as much as I can without grossing you out. A new study shows that male bats perform oral sex on females to prolong sexual intercourse. The study is the first report of male-to-female oral sex in bats, and it complements a previous Chinese study that revealed that female bats perform fellatio on males. Now this study, and listen to this one, and pardon me for grossing you out. Cunnilingus apparently increases duration of copulation in the Indian flying fox. Yeah, that was the study. And was published online by 2 Indian authors of an Indian university in the March issue of the journal PLOS One. The scientists studied a colony consisting of about 420 Indian flying foxes, one of the largest species of bat in the world, that were roosting on a fig tree in southern India. And according to Live Science, using binoculars and video cameras, the researchers witnessed a total of 57 instances of oral sex and intercourse over a period of 13 months. The studies note, and here's the quote-unquote, apart from humans, oral sex as foreplay prior to copulation is uncommon in mammals. Another pteropatid bat exhibits fellatio while females licking the penis of males during copulation. Oh my gosh. It appears that bats, especially pteropatids, perform oral sex, either cunnilingus or fellatio, possibly for achieving longer copulation. Oh my goodness, I don't think I've ever read a story like this on the Crazy Tom Show, but I'm not changing it. Live Science reports oral sex has also been observed among juvenile bonobo who perform it as part of play. The researchers observed that the male bat first grooms its penis to erection before it approaches the female, who at first withdraws while the male follows hers. And when the female yields to his advances, the male begins to lick her vagina in that cunnilingus act. According to the study, the act helps to arouse the female and lubricate her genital tract in preparation for sexual intercourse. The researchers observed that a session of cunnilingus foreplay typically continued for about 50 seconds, after which the male engages in an intercourse with the female for about 10 to 20 seconds before he resumes the act of cunnilingus for a minute and a half to 3 minutes. Oh my God! Oh my God, where did I find this story? The study noted a correlation between the duration of oral sex and copulation. Oh my God. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe this. One of the authors told Live Science, it is possible that prolonged copulation enables the mobility of sperm. Such mobility of sperm increases the chances of conception. Well, the scientists also speculated that the male might perform cunnilingus on females in order to clean off their competitor's sperm. This could help to ensure that the sperm of the male performing the act and not that of its rival impregnates the female. According to the researchers, in this context, cunnilingus would have been maladaptive after mating, as there's a risk of removing the male's own sperm. Observation at close range is needed to find out whether the male's tongue enters the vagina or not. Oh my goodness! The bats are having meatless Fridays during lunch! What the heck's going on? Oh my goodness! Well, Life Science reported a previous study by researchers at an entomological institute in China that found that short-nosed fruit bat also engages in oral sex routinely. The Chinese study was reported that the first time fellatio was observed in adult animals other than humans. Well, here's something interesting. The author of that article also observed fellatio among adult West African dwarf goats. Oh, God. And the researchers concluded that the female Chinese fruit bat performs oral sex on the male to prolong sexual intercourse. Only fruit bats have been observed to perform male to female or female to male oral sex. Okay, those in alternative relationships pay attention. What the bats are batty in their minds? Researchers have not observed oral sex among other species of fruit bats beside two scientific names, but it believes it may occur. Oh my God. Where do I find these articles? And this is why the Crazy Tom Show can be absolutely crazy. You get stuff like that, you talk about sex and bats? Well, please, for the human sake, do not use a bat for sexual intercourse, especially to those in the human race. I don't think they fit too well, and even holding the handle of the bat would hurt the female. Bats and sex, and I've just completely lost my mind. It's part 4 of my Crazy Town High 5 for this week. I'm going to need a minute or two just to recover from this. Well, I just had to include that musical interlude since I missed it last week. The famous beginning of Who Killed Who, that little mysterious little jig that I do before the final part of my Crazy Tom Show. I forgot to do that last week. I want to make sure I include it this week. And this has been a wacky, wacky show. Of course, I began with part 1 of my Crazy Tom High 5 talking about the Rutgers situation. Of course, the latest update, of course, Mike Rice being fired as head coach, and the video and the berating, and of course an assistant now resigning, and now possibly the athletic director might follow suit. So don't be surprised if there are more people that kind of get washed clean from the athletic program. Part 2, of course, is my final 4, and of course the unfortunate Louisville injury, and that What Drives Me Crazy segment where people were posting his broken leg online. I mean, it was just, yikes. Part 3, of course, was an update on the mass shootings and, of course, the antidepressant medications that go with it. Part 4, sex and bats. I don't know how that even got into my show, but you know what? Sometimes when you talk about really serious issues, you need to have basically a story that kind of breaks the mold and has you cackling in laughter, if you know what I mean. But getting back to a little bit more seriousness, I will end by giving you the final part of my Crazy Tom Show in a very interesting way. As I told you last week, am very happy to be podcasting the way that I have, especially for the last 7 years. And I've been very free and blessed to report on these situations, and I've learned a lot through research, a lot in talking to people, and a lot in rounding my craft. As I told you last week, the reason why I'm not in the media is very simple. It's because those who own TV stations want news presented in a certain way. Those who own, like CBS, such as Viacom does, NBC, which General Electric owns, they want the news presented in a certain way. They do not want to give you all the facts, and they want to protect the people that are giving the companies millions and in some cases billions of dollars. Well, you go back and you have to ask yourself this too. I did mention in part 3 in regards to a few people who died mysterious deaths. Think about this. George Carlin died a few years ago. And of course, he made some very factual points. And all of a sudden, he dies of, who knows what, a heart attack or something. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe the government went after him to take him down. Think about that. And then you have the great comedian Jeff Foxworthy. And you know about, if fill in the blank, you might be a redneck. Basically, if NASCAR is your favorite sport 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you drive a Dale Earnhardt Jr. vehicle to school, you might be a redneck. I mean, obviously, I'm just throwing those out for the sake of argument. But here's something to consider. Everyone knows about what happened 11 and a half years ago on September 11, 2001, when basically the world changed forever, not just the United States. But now in this day and age, as a loud Camaro, or Mustang rather, just goes flying by me at like warp speed, as I was saying, these days, the government is doing anything and everything to take away our freedoms. People still say we're the greatest country in the world. Maybe we are, but maybe we're not. But the real issues that are going on in this world, such as the economy, such as guns, such as equality, where is it? We're worried more about trivial things than the real issues. And unfortunately, because of underhanded contracts and such, the government is playing more toward the money than they are towards we the people. Think about this. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the the Emancipation Proclamation, and he declared all men free. But then at the end of 1913, Woodrow Wilson signed another pact and made men slaves again. It's been 100 years. And that same 1913 was when the Federal Reserve was created, and that's why we have a private central bank. Now, we have a situation where even what I say, and my opinion, which is here on this Crazy Tom show, what I say may consider me as a terrorist. These days you open your mouth and you're automatically offending somebody, without even saying a word. And unfortunately, the people who run this world are the biggest criminals. There is an article, courtesy of WashingtonsBlog.com from October 2012, which is entitled, U.S. military may consider you a potential terrorist if you are young, use social media, or question mainstream ideologies. Listen to this. These are some warning signs that you've been turned into a terrorist who will soon kill your co-workers, according to the U.S. military. You've recently changed your choices in entertainment. You have the kill your discussions. You complain about bias. You're socially withdrawn. And you're frustrated with mainstream ideologies. Your risk factors for radicalization include social networks and youth. That was the assessment of a terrorism advisory organization inside the U.S. Army called the Asymmetric Warfare Group in 2011. And the government has more or less classified journalists as terrorists. So it's time for an updated list of actions and beliefs which government officials have said may indicate potential terrorism. Can you believe that? And I'm going to go down the list as I kind of get my papers straight here. Here's the list. Being young. If you live near a battle zone, you're fair game. Reporting or doing journalism. Speaking out against government policies. Protesting anything. Questioning war, even though war reduces our national security. Criticizing the government's targeting of innocent civilians with drones, although killing innocent civilians with drones is one of the main things which increase terrorism. Asking questions about pollution, even at a public congressional hearing. Paying cash at an internet cafe. Asking questions about Wall Street shenanigans. Holding gold. Creating alternative currencies. Stocking up on more than 7 days of food, even though all Mormons are taught to stockpile food and most Hawaiians store up on extra food. Having bumper stickers saying things like, know your rights or lose them. Investigating factory farming, infringing a copyright, taking pictures or videos, talking to police officers, wearing a hoodie, driving a van, writing on a piece of paper. And don't be surprised this, not having a Facebook account may soon be added to it. Oh, dear Lord. Holding the following beliefs may also be considered grounds for suspected terrorism. Here it is. Being frustrated with mainstream ideologies. Using social media. Valuing online privacy. Supporting Ron Paul or being a libertarian. Liking the Founding Fathers. Being a Christian. Being anti-tax, anti-regulation, or for the gold standard. Being reverent of individual liberty. Being anti-nuclear. Believe in conspiracy theories. A belief that one's personal and or national way of life is under attack. Impose strict religious tenets or laws on society for fundamentalists. Insert religion into the political sphere. Those who seek to politicize religion. Supported political movements for autonomy. Being anti-abortion. Being anti-Catholic. Being anti-global. Suspicious of centralized federal authority. Fiercely nationalistic, as opposed to universal and international in orientation. A belief in the need to be prepared for an attack either by participating in survivalism. Opposing genetically engineered food, and that's where the Monsanto thing came into play while the gay marriage stuff was going on. We weren't paying attention to that. Opposing surveillance. And that's the last one, actually. A postscript to this is this. Given that the U.S. government is directly supporting Al-Qaeda and Iranian terrorists, and the fact that the government has removed some of these groups from the list of terrorist organizations for political reasons, a reader satirically jokes that only those U.S. citizens who join one of the actual terrorist groups which the U.S. now supports will avoid being labeled terrorists. Couple interesting quotes real quick. One stated, so both using social media and not having a Facebook account are warning signs? It's official. It's completely arbitrary and they're making up whatever they feel like. Another one quotes, okay, so as long as we worship the evildoers and stupidly question nothing, forget history, then we're cool? Another one says, the tree of liberty calls. And then one other says, I cite this George Washington quote, government is not reason, it is not eloquent, it is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. This is what Americans need to remember and face as fundamental fact. Meanwhile, there is a horrible exception to Abraham Lincoln's observations that you can fool all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. The problem is that the established systems are set up so that they only have to fool enough of the people enough of the time. And the only way to fix the problems require that there are no longer enough people being fooled enough of the time. What should happen is the same as Thomas Jefferson said, I know of no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion. I just cannot believe how horrendous this has really become. This is a scary time in our history. Basically, here's another one that was put up here. If the Founding Fathers were alive today, they would probably run afoul of all of these categories. As such, they could very well end up indefinitely detained at Guantanamo Bay or assassinated. even scarier yet. The only thing I can really say very simply is this. And I want you to look ahead and think of a little bit of a commonality that I may have mentioned in a previous Crazy Tom show, even as late as last year. The way our economy is, we are looking at a very bad time in our history. Remember, before the 21st century, there were not one, but two stock market crashes. Not many people know about the first stock market crash in 1907. 10 years later, the United States got involved into World War I, even though World War I had already started two or 3 years prior. Everyone knows about the 1929 stock market crash. 12 years later, the United States got involved in the World War II. Of course, 2 years after Germany invaded Poland to start the war. Now, in 2008, we had the banker bailouts, the equivalent to a stock market crash. What's going to happen 10 years later? 2018, 2019, 2020. From an old Bugs Bunny cartoon, when you hear the sound of the gong, it will be exactly 2018. I don't know if they say 2018 or 2000 AD, but guess what? Not good. It's right now not looking like a matter of if we're going to be involved in a third world war, but a matter of when. Based on history repeating itself twice. 10 years after the first stock market crash, World War I. 12 years after the second one, World War II. 2008 and the banker bailouts happened, very similar to a stock market crash. History is doomed to repeat itself. I am not looking forward to this. This is why now more than ever you need to live each day as if it's your last, because someday it will be. And somebody listening to my podcast probably has a drone coming down to West Windsor Township and have had to strike me on sight. And the media will cover it up. That's why I'm warning everybody. Be ready. Be prepared. It's not all gloom and doom. That's why we have crankiness crushers, and that's why we have each day to be thankful for. And as long as you do the most good, the end will really never come. So keep that in the back of your minds. As I close things out, that's it for another edition of the Crazy Tom Show with your DJ Crazy Tom. Was on the road and here now in West Windsor, getting ready to do yet another run. I'm glad you guys enjoyed this one, and I know it was a very difficult one to kind of podcast, especially towards the end, but you get the really radical and then you get the really fanatically and humoristically bad and shocking and everything else. But hey, that's what I'm here for, and I'm glad I'm able to provide this stuff for you. I'll remind everybody this Crazy Tom Show is brought to you by your friends at the Crankiness Crusher. Of course, check out crankinesscrusher.com or facebook.com/crankinesscrusher. By Michelle's Crochet, which of course is out in Louisiana. If you want to check out her services, send her an email, michellescrochet@yahoo.com. It's MICHELLESCROCHET@yahoo.com, so you can inquire of her services. Also brought to you by Epic Playground out in Boulder, Colorado, by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, and of course, by Liberated Syndication. And I'll remind everybody that for any and all archives of my Crazy Tom Show, just visit my webpage at www.crazytom.libsyn.com. Once again, www.crazytom.libsyn.com. If Libsyn does not work, I'm on iTunes as well. Just go to iTunes and type in Crazy Tom Show in the search box. I am there. You can subscribe to my podcast, and every new show that's up, it'll be downloaded to your MP3 or Droid device, whatever you have. So again, Crazy Tom Show on iTunes. I get a lot of support from people in regards to the Crazy Tom Show, and I'm very blessed to have all of you. And remember, if you're a listener for the very first time, you can always send your comments, and I'll always do everything I can to respond. There are 3 ways to reach me. Facebook.com/CrazyTom, Twitter.com/CrazyTomShow, or just send me an email, DJKRAYZTom@Comcast.net. One more again, Facebook.com/CrazyTom, Twitter.com/CrazyTomShow, or send me an email, DJKRAYZTom@Comcast.net. Thanks again for listening and surviving yet another Crazy Tom Show. Your DJ Crazy Tom signs off for now as, yes, it might as well be spring for once. We've had 5.5 months of winter here in New Jersey. It's about time we get about 6.5 months of spring and summer and cancel the winter of 2013 and 14. That would absolutely be very, very nice. So if there's some warm weather this weekend, go out and enjoy it. Every single one of you deserves it. So hang in there and you take care for now. And let's go for another Crazy Tom Show next week, shall we?